Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Week 1 of spring football is in the books. The Sun Devils are having some good position battles, some intriguing developments. But we're going to dive into all of that, Joe. But before that, it wouldn't be a recording day for Speak of the Devils if there's not a whole lot of weird news for Always Something University.
Yeah, I tell you, when folks say we can't have good things around these parts, only a couple days after that narrative was proven untrue, life always finds a way, and it was proven true again. And we'll get into what we're talking about with all this cryptic talk. Back to the football field, as Brad mentioned, you got a few days of practice under the respective belts for the Sun Devils. Really early in spring camp, as far too early to draw major conclusions about depth chart and performance and things like that. But you're starting to see, some early signs of what will become. So across a few sports, a few things to discuss here this evening.
Yeah, and so a little after we dive into what happened on the practice field for the Sun Devil football team, we'll be joined by a few Sun Devils to get their thoughts on Week 1. Defensive end Elijah O'Neal, tight end Markeston Douglas, and defensive tackle Jacob Kongaika will join the show. But let's start things off on probably the best note possible, a national championship for Arizona State men's swim and dive under head coach Bob Bowman. They've been knocking at the door for the last couple of years, building their way up, have been basically a wire-to-wire number 1 in the rankings all season long. And then after obliterating basically most records at the Pac-12s, they just took home the national championship in swimming. Awesome. Great. Let's celebrate. Oh, wait, it's an Arizona State thing. So that happiness was short-lived.
Yeah, it's been a wild couple of days, and I can only imagine how folks that are deeply ingrained in the swimming community and enthusiastic about swimming and diving for Arizona State, how they're feeling right now. It's a wild deal, as you mentioned, the first national championship that the program's delivered. Of course, a program, as we've talked about, along with wrestling and men's tennis, I believe. These were cut from existence from Arizona State in the spring of 2008. Short bit of time that those programs just flat out did not exist any longer. They were brought back, of course, but you look 15, 16 years later, wrestling near the top of what it's doing across the nation. Men's swim and dive for Arizona State claims a national championship, which was a great thing a couple days ago. Obviously, that will remain a great thing for the rest of time, but college sports being college sports and finding a way to disappoint you and break your heart and just flat out suck. The business aspect of it rears its head again. Bob Bowman hightails it, books out of Tempe after building a national champion, pieces out Sun Devils everywhere. He's a Texas Longhorn now.
Yeah, Coach Bowman is now a Longhorn, building up the swim program over there. It's disappointing because they had, 2-3 days of Sun Devil fans being able to enjoy a national championship, ASU status as a swim school, one of the premier in the country, and all the hard work that he's been able to do in building up ASU as a destination for elite swimmers across the country and across the world. Of course, Leon Marchand, the outstanding French swimmer who's going to probably win a ton of gold medals. He's been swimming for Coach Bowman. But when Texas dollars come to bat, I mean, it's really going to be hard for any coach for ASU, especially in a position where I believe Ralph pointed out today, like day 140 of ASU without an athletic director, they lose a national championship winning coach. So it's really just kind of a gut punch. The celebration short-lived, as you mentioned, the title will live on forever, but just kind of the afterglow of such a historic achievement is really short-lived.
Yeah, and it's something that, for it to happen early in the first business day after the championship is won gives you the impression that probably this was in the works for a while. Do we really think that this came about in less than 48 hours just because, oh my goodness, now we know who you are, says Texas? No, of course, Bob Bowman is and has been a very known figure in that community. It's just frustrating, man. It really is. It's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If athletes or coaches succeed, well, then they're going to go to a program of higher prestige, whether it's a coach taking a different job, whether it's a transfer. athletes or coaches aren't maximizing what they can do, if they feel they're underutilized, then you transfer. Again, damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you excel, then the probability of departure is high. If folks don't get the opportunities they feel they deserve, then seems like the probability of departure is high as well. So, like I said, it's just a very, very frustrating ordeal, all things considered. We certainly don't know the logistics behind it, the dollars behind it. We don't know if ASU had a chance to retain him, and the lack of a full-time athletic director is what held it off. I don't know the facts along that side of it, but certainly doesn't pass the smell test, at least to me. And I get it. I get that it's a business, and that's always going to be the retort in this scenario of, hey, it's a business. That's it. I get it, but loyalty matters. College sports suck. That's really what it is.
It's a tough pill to swallow, but for ASU was anticipating the move. To your point, Joe, had a replacement already lined up, a guy who already was on staff, and a former Sun Devil swimmer in his own right, and an assistant under Bob Bowman. Herbie Boehm named the new head coach of the swim program. Now, I won't pretend to know that I am deeply knowledgeable about collegiate swimming, but I did some research, and I kind of, tested, got the temperature out there. I'm just kind of, college swim Twitter and social media. And he is somebody who's pretty highly regarded. And we'll dive a little bit more into this here in the future and get Coach on the program here. But he's a guy that's a really forward thinker, very seems to be on the cutting edge of swim analytics and using a lot of data points. And obviously, with what he's been able to do in developing the Sun Devil's speed and in the pool, the sprint side of things, pretty darn impressive. So it seems like a lot of people, not even outside of the maroon and gold and outside of Tempe, are really excited to see what he can do at now a national championship caliber program.
Yeah, and one thing about him, similar to the likes of Willie Bloomquist, of Zeke Jones, of Kenny Dillingham from an academic perspective, he's an alum. He swam for ASU from 2010 to 2013. He's been on this coaching staff based on his bio since 2018, and in April 22 became the associate head coach. So this is not, just bringing in somebody that's familiar with the program. Obviously, first and foremost, it's continuity. It's somebody that's been on the staff in a high role, so it makes a ton of sense, and it follows that trend that we've seen, whether it's by design or just kind of a happy accident. Yet another ASU alum, a former student athlete for Arizona State, heading into a head coaching role, which is obviously a good thing from the passion perspective. And you certainly hope that mitigates the potential for departure. It's interesting that of how many ASU alums there are in the athletic department as head coaches for Sun Devil programs right now. Again, that's a very, very good thing. I think that there's also something to that in the sense of what can ASU do in the day and age of college athletics, and the almighty dollar being as almighty as it's ever been in college athletics. What can they do to mitigate that turnover? And I think that bringing in alums as head coaches helps that. But again, I'm not bringing up that point to say that this individual is, some just check the box hire. It's a highly, highly qualified person in his field. Again, like you, I'm not going to pretend to be an aficionado of men's swimming or the English language for that matter, but this strikes as a very innovative hire, a guy that's obviously relatively young but has that fresh approach. So hopefully he can maintain the standard that's been set these last several years, because obviously, of course, several years ago ASU swimming was nowhere near the position it's in right now. So I'm sure those passionate about the program would love nothing more than for this tradition and this standard to continue, even with the changing of the guard at head coach.
A guy who knows what it takes to win a national championship, and as you mentioned, Joe, with the ties and the alum status, and a guy who swam for the Devils. So it's a pretty good hire, and so we'll see, and we'll how things go, and as the Devils will look to defend their championship next year. And I mentioned earlier, we'll be getting Herbie on the program at some point down the road. And you mentioned, Joe, another name in there that had some pretty good things associated with coming back to coach at his alma mater, Zeke Jones. Since we haven't done a full show since the NCAA tournament in men's or in wrestling, Joe, how'd the Devils do for anybody who's perhaps been under a rock for the last couple weeks?
There you go. Some more positive news for sure. And, at least to now and hopefully permanently, with no skids and turns that take it a negative direction, as was the case, of course, with the previous topic we just addressed. Yeah, last time we were out here in a full show capacity, we were, previewing the NCAA tournament, giving some check-ins about that. As many of you, I'm sure, know by now, ASU finished 6th at the NCAA's, highlighted by Richie Figueroa winning a national championship at the 125-pound weight class. He's ASU's first individual national champion since Zahid Valencia went back-to-back in 2018 and 19, and he's ASU's first national champion at 125 pounds since Anthony Robles did so in 2011. I feel kind of smart because I think when we did our NCAA preview for one of the episodes that we did, kind of asked me, Brad, where I saw them finishing, and I think I said somewhere between like 4 and 8. I think I said that. If I did, then I guess I'm smart because 6 is right there in between 4 and 8, right? So if you just kind of go by the numbers, ASU is now finished in the top 7 at NCAA's each of the last 4 years. For context, there are only 4 programs in the country that have done that same thing. You've got Penn State, Iowa, and Michigan joining Arizona State. You don't even have to know much about college wrestling to know that some of those names that I just listed are elite programs. So for ASU to be up there with that, that's a big, big deal. In addition to what Richie Figueroa did, Ja'Cory Teamer, national runner-up. He, of course, made it to the final at 157. He had 4 total All-Americans, Richie Figueroa, Ja'Cory Teamer, Colton Schultz, and Kyle Parco. Again, to become an All-American in college wrestling, you got to finish in the top 8 at your weight class. It's not like a voting thing like we see for, many of the major revenue sports there. Added to that, more positivity. Last week, Richie Figueroa was named the Pac-12 Wrestler of the Year, giving ASU 3 straight for that accolade. Last year, Brandon Courtney, also at 125 pounds, won that conference honor. And in 2022, Colton Schultz did that, of course, the heavyweight. So a highly successful season for Arizona State wrestling. Yet again, at that national level, you saw Penn State set all these records for, I believe, the most points scored in an NCAA tournament, the highest margin of victory between them and the second place team. So as we've noted a few times, Penn State is doing some superhuman things that hopefully maybe one day ASU can take them down from that perch. But for right now, if you're finishing in those single digits inside that top 8, they really like to get in the top 4 because you get like a podium recognition, you get a different trophy if you're in the top 4. But finishing 6th, again, using the same narrative as talking about the swim team, a program that was cut just 15, 16 years ago. That's an incredible thing for Sun Devil Wrestling. So yet again, incredible work by Zeke Jones, his entire staff, all his athletes, and they're going to be focused ahead to the Big 12. Some big boy wrestling there, that's for sure. And then you got a guy like Colton Schultz also pursuing potential Olympic dreams this summer as well.
So even though it has been an overall kind of a difficult year for some of the more, marquee Sun Devil sports, football, baseball, basketball, there's been a whole lot of success stories, with the swim and dive national championship, what wrestling has been able to do. Water polo's in the top 10. They might be making some noise here. The golf squads are in good position as always. So, got to celebrate some Sun Devil successes while we're at it. So congrats to Zeke. I think, that won't be the last that the wrestling mention you hear on this program here in the near future. Moving on, some nice little developments on the diamond for ASU baseball. 4-0 week, a much needed 4-0 week for ASU in baseball. And Ryan Campos was a big part of that, and he was named the Pac-12 Player of the Week today. So maybe this is the long-awaited and much-needed kind of mid-season turnaround for the Devils that we've been talking about.
Yeah, that was a very good time to have a very good week, looking really good against Cal over the weekend. They're back up at the 500 mark, both overall at 14-14 and in conference play at 6-6. So, again, that was much needed. And you had, 3 of you're back scoring some runs, which is good, and that the week as a whole, as you mentioned, they went 4-0, scored 10, 14, 10, and 9 runs collectively. Now they allowed 9, 8, 9, and 6. So, we're kind of seeing that heavy hitting and pitching with some question marks there, but that's something that we will see how that affects them moving forward, because as actually tomorrow evening, ASU will line up against Grand Canyon, and then they head to Corvallis to play the red-hot Oregon State Beavers. So this is going to be a challenging week. I saw that I don't know if it's the pitcher that ASU would face, but Grand Canyon had a guy throw a no-hitter last week.
Yeah.
And then Oregon State, again, they're playing elite baseball. They're back at that level that they were not terribly. I mean, they've obviously been very good for a very long time, but they're a national championship contender where things are right now. So these four games that ASU has coming up this week. Again, it's an every week thing to see what we've got from this team, but hopefully they can build on last week, use those that handful of wins to move them in the right direction, keep some of these bats going, because they certainly will need to bring their best, again, especially going up to Corvallis, but they cannot overlook that Grand Canyon team they will be facing coming up here on Tuesday.
So before we turn our attention back to football, we'll take a quick diversion over to the hardwood. Joe, did you have NC State in your Final Four in your bracket?
I guess I can say yeah. I mean, I didn't not because I didn't do one. So I'm trying to find a way to cop out here. If I would have made any predictions, I doubt they would have been involved in that. Same with Alabama.
Yeah, so the 11 seed NC State Wolfpack are heading to Phoenix as part of one of the Final Four teams. Of course, that means former Sun Devil DJ Horn is back in the Valley with a chance at a national championship, which serves as a little segue into some portal talk, because since we last joined you, 5 Sun Devils have jumped into the portal, made their intentions known. Braylon Green, Nikhil Watson, Malachi Davis were some of the more depth players. Davis obviously did not play this past season. And 2 names that a little bit more impactful for the Devils, and Jemiah Neal and Frankie Collins. Of course, Collins coming off a season in which he set the program single-season steals record, kind of the heart and soul of the last 2 years of the Sun Devil basketball team. He did leave the door open technically in his social media message. We'll see exactly how that is, because I believe he kind of did the same, played the same cards last year in terms of exploring his options before ultimately coming back. But man, it is, like as you said, Joe, just the business of college sports these days is a little difficult. It seems like every year Bobby Hurley's got to almost rebuild a team from scratch.
Yeah. First, real quick, going back to DJ Horn, I always like to say not all transfers are created equal. He's someone that, I got no problem with. Good to see it. He's from that area. That makes sense when someone is going to go back home playing college basketball or any college sport. So that's one for me. There are some transfers that I just don't care for how they go about doing what they did, and that doesn't get a lot of support from me. I'm just one man. Guy like DJ Horn, got no problem with it. So hopefully, that they have some compelling basketball the rest of the way out. But yeah, focusing on ASU. So yeah, you're talking about another potentially large roster overhaul. They get 13 scholarship players there for basketball. So you talked about having 5 in the portal right now. I'm not saying one thing necessarily means another, but when you see these guys who enter the portal for a second straight year, I just really get the feeling that the likelihood of them coming back is next to nothing. I just look back at a guy like BJ Green and the fact that he entered the portal, obviously different people, different sport, but he entered the portal after the 2022 season, did the same after 2023, and it was really never a possibility for him to return. I'm not saying that's the case for guys like Neal or Frankie Collins, but you just kind of get that feel like if they're going to do that again, okay, like if they have this itch to leave, or if they have a financial reason pushing them away or pulling them somewhere else, then it kind of is what it is. So, I'm almost entering this with the mindset that maybe these players all don't return. I could be very wrong. I could be somewhat wrong, or I could be completely right. Just looking through things. So let's say if all 5 of those were to leave, not return to ASU via the transfer portal, giving it back to ASU, that would create some really dubious achievements, especially if Malachi Davis, Braylon Green, and Nikhil Watson all leave. And I'll tell you why. If those 3 don't return to ASU, then that would create a scenario where every single scholarship high school and junior college signee that ASU had for the 2021, 2022, and 2023, that all of them will have left the program via transfer. And that adds up to 10 people across those 3 classes. If that all happens, that means that 8 of those 10 will have left Arizona State after year 1. And that can obviously be a lot of things. It can be guys that aren't getting a lot of playing time. A couple of years ago, ASU had a signing class that included some players that have proven to not be, power conference caliber players. Sometimes they just can't necessarily hack it. You got a guy like Malachi Davis, didn't get a lot of playing time. That kind of makes sense. That's not necessarily ASU's fault. That's a natural roster attrition. But then there can be other reasons for that as well. However you slice it, it's not good at all to have to replace more than half and upwards of, 3/4 of your scholarship roster year over year. ASU does have a highly regarded 5-person signing class for 2024. So they've got those 5 coming in, which is big for basketball. 5 is a pretty dang big class. A lot of times it's like 2 or 3. And that class is ranked 18th nationally and 4th in the Big 12 behind Arizona, Baylor, and Kansas. And all of those are, typically very good basketball teams. One has a hard time getting out of the Sweet 16, but that's no big deal. In any regard, we'll see what happens. Right now, we're recording on April 1st. We got an even month until this basketball transfer portal window closes on May 1st. So you never know what's going to happen. You always have those guys that are, have cold feet and they're dangling and towing the line and, sitting on both sides of the fence. And on the last minute, like a Luke Hill or what have you, they enter their name in the transfer portal at the 11th hour. So just because guys aren't in now, of course, does not mean that they won't be as things progress. So however you want to slice it, another year of a lot of, roster management and player acquisition decisions to be made by Bobby Hurley and company.
It's going to be an interesting month until this window closes in terms of how this Sun Devil roster is going to come together. And as we teased, I think a show or two ago, we'll be taking a deep dive into the program a little bit later on in the offseason, kind of exploring a little top to bottom holistic view of what's going on with Sun Devil hoops. And so now that we turn our attention to football, let's kind of make that pivot with a good recruiting note. ASU added a 2025 verbal commitment recently, beefing up in the trenches with a commitment from Alema Yasua. He's got a couple very impressive things going for him. Plays at Powerhouse Bishop Gorman up in Vegas. That's really good to see. Also really good to see is a 6'7", 292-pound prep frame. He will take an LDS mission, so he won't be heading to Tempe until 2027. But he's a guy that I know this coaching staff is really excited to bring in to the program eventually down the road. And you just can't teach size, and so having that frame for Coach Saga to build upon and work with in a couple of years is pretty impressive. The 2025 recruiting class now stands at 4, with 2 of those guys being offensive linemen. Matai Jefferson is the other guy, also pretty big, 6'4", 330 pounds. So it looks like the Devils are addressing the trenches in 2025.
Yeah, and that's something that you certainly want to see. You want to be able to build that from within. ASU's gotten some solid transfers along the offensive line, but as we've talked about, a lot of times when we've focused on the transfer portal, which seems like every day, those offensive linemen, they're in such high demand. You'll have guys that are making massive leaps of going from, FCS programs to college football playoff contenders if they can play, because again, offensive linemen at any position are in such high demand. What do I mean by that, or how is that relevant? Is that it's tough given the circumstances ASU's in to count on year after year trying to get high caliber offensive linemen solely through the transfer portal, because of the fact that the competition is going to be just about as thick as it can be, because a lot of teams, even in elite positions, are looking for some holes to fill on the offensive line. So if you can bring in young guys and develop them and hope that they stick around for a while to become starters and stay in your program, that's certainly a very good thing to do.
All right, Joe, let's talk spring football. Week 1 in the books. Devils took the field last Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, knocking out those first 3 practices. Of course, everything culminates on Friday, April 26th with the spring game. The first 2 days of practice were in jersey, shorts, and helmets. They did put on some shoulder pads for Saturdays, up in the physicality. But these first weeks are a little tough to get kind of a true feel for things, how things are going. But there were still some, plenty of good things to talk about, some notable developments, and of course, as we outlined in our preview, a lot of position battles that are going to be pretty crucial going forward. None more so than at quarterback, and of course, with Jaden Rashada still working his way back from injury. Now he has been out there and with the quarterbacks and getting in those mental reps and running around as much as he can, as he recovers from the thumb injury. But it really has been a 2-horse race with Sam Levitt, Trent Bourget, and also walk-on true freshman Navi Bruzon has also been getting a lot of reps as well, as we'll get to, looking pretty good. Not a ton. It was really kind of standing out so much about the play, but I think right now the one thing that really kind of jumped out to me is really just how hands-on Marcus Arroyo is as the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, especially when you kind of compare and contrast to last year, the approach of Bo Baldwin. It's really kind of stood out, obviously, that Arroyo is a guy who's played the position at the FBS level and has a pretty great track record of developing young quarterbacks. But with Levitt and Bourget and Bruzon now, under the tutelage of Arroyo, I think that bodes well for the future.
Yeah, and we've said on multiple occasions, and it's just a very logical thought, we don't expect this quarterback battle to really shake out into any discernible depth chart, throughout by the end of the spring, let alone for the first few days of practices. I mean, this really strikes you as something that's going to be one of those wire-to-wire deals that goes into the fall before you really get it figured out. But as you mentioned, it's good to see that on the coaching aspect, because again, after a few days of practice in the spring, you're not going to have anything determined, really. I mean, you're going to see glimpses of things, some flashes, and see how some guys fit into certain roles. But when you see how some of the new coaches are, especially someone at offensive coordinator, I mean, that's obviously a huge spot to fill on that coaching staff. So you want to see a guy that's got some energy, some enthusiasm, and being very hands-on, because again, especially at you want it for all coaches, but especially at the coordinator level, if someone's like kind of standoffish or a little bit uninvolved, that can maybe rub you the wrong way. So to see the opposite of that is a good thing.
All right, so let's talk about the play on the field so far. Again, with kind of the caveat that it's still very early and that the first 2 practices were in, without pads. Sam Levitt has really looked the part. And, in terms of comparing and contrasting to last year's big quarterback acquisition and Drew Pine, Levitt has the advantage in stature. I think arm strength. He's also shown some pretty good mobility out there as well. Now, this still being very early in spring, there's no true first or second team. There's been a lot of kind of mixing and matching, a lot of units, just kind of guys working with different quarterbacks and actually both sides of the ball. You've seen kind of a lot of a mishmash approach to find what guys kind of resonate in chemistry. But Levitt has been kind of among the more frequent of the group and taking being the first in team sessions as well. He's shown off a really good arm. There has been some times where perhaps it's been a little bit of scattershot, or maybe he's taking a little bit more time to kind of process in the pocket. But I think he's been pretty impressive so far, if not necessarily outstanding. He was held out of the back half of Saturday's third practice with what Coach Kenny Dillingham called a hip issue. Doesn't expect it to be something that's going to be bothersome or much of a factor, but it was notable on Saturday as Bourget and Bruzon were the ones who got most of the work. Trent has been pretty steady as his usual self, kind of making the cerebral reads and kind of you see the chemistry that he has with this group of pass catchers on display, kind of leading to some nice connections throughout the week, making some nice throws. Did have some picks over the course of the week. Navi Bruzon's been really interesting. Of course, the diminutive lefty, but with a nice live arm and kind of like Trenton Bourget in terms of not a big stature, but just highly productive at the prep level. He had some really impressive scrambles, kind of really exciting play. Also, some of the expected freshman moments in ASU's front 7 or so, or front 6 rather. Not making any of the quarterbacks' lives too comfortable back there in team sessions, but overall, a steady week. We'll see exactly if any of them are going to start to separate in week 2.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for folks to keep in mind is it's fair game. I'm sure the guy who plays the best, both now and in the fall, and putting the whole body of work together, that's going to be the quarterback. You don't have your 3-year starter incumbent that just needs to get absolutely blown out of the water for there to be a change. I mean, nobody looked good last year. I mean, there's nothing that happened at quarterback last year that anyone's going to say, okay, this is, what is going to keep this person in this position or is going to elevate this person or what have you. It's kind of just a whole thing that you got to, throw out just because of all the personnel issues and injury issues and everything like that. I mean, nobody was playing up to the standard that they expect, but that creates open opportunities. So even if there's someone like Levitt that a lot of people are probably thinking just might be as talented as he is, maybe an afterthought between Rashada and Bourget, he could do plenty of things to go from an afterthought to the main thought. But again, a lot of time and action needs to unfold before anything like that gets figured out.
As we talked about, the running back group is one of the team's bigger strengths, and early returns still very good. Probably the most notable development is Cam Scadaboo trimmed down a little bit. It looks a little bit leaner. It looks a little bit quicker. That has been on display throughout the first week. He had a really nice move in the main event session with Keyshawn Elliott, who's been really good at linebacker for ASU so far. But Scat really showing off that kind of renewed quickness, made some big plays. All the running backs really have had some moments over the course of the week again without having pads on, in the first two practice team session. Really kind of hard to get by, but each of them had a pretty nice, have had some pretty good highlight moments. George Hart on Saturday had, I think, a particularly good practice. In fact, made probably the catch of camp so far with kind of a running behind him, the quarterback threw behind. Reached back with one hand, made the big catch, and had a nice gain there. Kyson Brown looks like he's leveled up from his freshman season a year ago. Raleek Brown, obviously the big addition there. Every practice seems to have at least one moment that just like shows that explosiveness, that playmaking ability on full display, whether it's in a main event or he had a nice play as kind of taking a run outside to the left to the house that was really actually sprung by a nice block from left tackle Jalen Clem. Did have a fumble that was lost during a team session, but overall, you're seeing why the guy was a 5-star recruit.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of competition at that position group, and I'm sure that the guys know it, and they're putting their best foot forward. And obviously, as we've talked about, Jason Brown coming around in the fall, that competition is going to just get even tougher. So you've got depth, you've got capability, you've got guys that know that they've got an opportunity, but they've got to earn it. Whether that's returning players or somebody new like a Raleek Brown. So that is a position group overall that, my goodness, if you can stay healthy, and of course that little footnote is going to be added to just about everything, that could be really special. And I just feel like that competition that they're going through now, that's really obviously just now kicking up, it's going to be something that's going to push these guys and let the coaches be creative, because obviously a lot of these different running backs have different skill sets that they use, bring different things to the table. It's something that could be pretty special. We saw flashes last year, but this could be when it really hits the ground running, and that's very much on the table.
Moving over to wide receiver, of course, Elijah Badger, Xavier Guillory are out for spring. Jordan Tyson was pretty much out for the first two practices. Did come back on a Saturday and was getting out there, which was good to see, of course, as he's coming off the ACL injury from a couple seasons ago. The one thing that really jumped out to me, other than just kind of the group's overall depth, is Melquan Stovall. In my book, has really kind of been the standout player of the first week of fall camp. Absolutely terrific. His route running has been razor sharp. There's been some poorly thrown balls in some sessions. He's made some great adjustments, made some great contested catches as well. Troy O'Meary also has been really looks like he's dialed in and ready to go. If he's able to keep that mental consistency and focus, along with his absurd physical traits, I think that's going to be a pretty potent group. Jake Smith continuing to be really good now that he's eligible. So even though you're missing two starters from a year ago and your top guy in Elijah Badger, the depth in this group is really standing out. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Caleb Black, the redshirt freshman, is also looking really good, and seems to be making the most of the opportunities with Badger and Guillory out.
This is exactly what we talked about in our preview. With Guillory being out, Badger being a kind of unknown at that time, that creates the opportunity for other players like that next notch down, those ones that are kind of fringe starters, but guys that get playing time, they're going to get a lot more opportunities. And the two top names on that list, Melquan Stovall, Troy O'Meary. And Stovall, that's not a huge surprise, really. You look at his accolades and his achievements, he had well over 100 career receptions from his two college stops prior to coming to ASU, Colorado State and Nevada. So this is a guy that's played a lot of college football and done quite a bit. Troy O'Meary, last year there weren't a lot of highlights, but he's someone that on more than one occasion, you looked at what he did, especially like in the red zone and that sort of thing. And it's like, man, this guy, he's got the physical size and the ability to do something special. If you can put it together for a whole season, then that's something really impressive. So with those guys, again, having greater opportunities, they would have had opportunities even, when Guillory and Badger are back in the lineup. They're just getting more action now. So that's going to help that position group. And you talk to a guy like Caleb Black, someone who's taking advantage of his opportunities. And then, Jake Smith, the story that all Sun Devil fans, I'm sure, want to see, prosper this year. Great to see him out in action as well. But, once again, kind of like we're talking about at other position groups, where though there are some injury issues that are holding guys off the field, that's just creating opportunities for greater competition elsewhere in the depth chart.
Moving to tight end, and Bryce Pierre so far I thought has been kind of living up to the role and the expectations that he has as kind of the presumptive starter. He's looked really good, really dialed in, is both a receiver and a blocker. I think one of the other notable development has been Markeston Douglas, who looks every bit the 280 pounds he's listed at 6'5", but some really soft hands, some good catches, some good receptions on the week, including one that was really particularly impressive. I think it was Sam Levitt unleashed the ball over the middle into traffic and made the connection. And Markeston knew he was going to take a hit, took the hit, held on to the ball. So if the quarterbacks can continue to work the middle of the field with the tight ends, and Bryce Pierre, Markeston Douglas, who has had some experience at a high-level program at Florida State. That could be a pretty potent combo. One of the guys I think does kind of deserve some mention, even though he might be a little bit further down the depth chart, is Colson Arens, who's had really good connections with Navi Bruzon, perhaps in that third, fourth team. But it's worth noting they've connected on several occasions, oftentimes with some impressive throws and some impressive receptions over the middle.
Yeah, I think on offense, Douglas really is one of the top, I'd say, 3 new additions that I'm most intrigued to see. Of course, Raleek Brown probably tops that list, but Douglas is somebody that, again, you just look at the measurables alone, and then you look at the video and see that he can move and that he's putting together some consistent play. I mean, that's a bona fide weapon right there to combine with Bryce Pierre and others to keep that tight end position group strong despite several departures.
Moving to the trenches offensive line. We know that Leif Fatano is going to handle his business at center, and just kind of the question marks all around so far. And again, there's been some movement, some shuffling. Emmett Boley still working his way back as well. And, last year's starter at right tackle, kind of going left to right a little bit. Josh Atkins, the Hawaii transfer, has been running with most often the first team at that position. But Jalen Clem, the Washington transfer, has been right there with him. Mentioned that Clem had a nice block to a spring Raleek Brown on a big touchdown run. Sean Naa has been running a lot with the with that kind of that first group, alongside Fatanu, but Ben Coleman, of course, with that experience, it's going to be an interesting competition as those guys go at it, as the pads are now on and the physicality is only going to continue to ramp up. Issei Matoatia, the New Mexico transfer, locking down that right guard spot as expected. But with Boley kind of still getting his footing, and he's been out there as well. But Kyle Scott and Maxi Hanachor have been running with that kind of lead group at right tackle. So a lot of one known, and then a lot of interesting battles that are going to be continuing over the course of the spring.
Yeah, one of the kind of low-key storylines I'm eager to see how it pans out is what they do with those 3 guys at guards, because they all have starting experience and all are capable starters. And Coleman and Matuatia, these are all 3 guys that are legitimate starters. Ben Coleman has played some tackle in his day. I know he's a much better fit on an interior position, but he has played tackle in his day at Cal. So again, those are 3 guys that seem like they're qualified to be in the starting lineup. And obviously, as we know, Naa played some tackle as well, although I think you probably agree that that's a position for him as well. So eager to see how that shakes out, especially in the spring when you have a guy like Bram Walden being out at tackle, a guy like Emmett Boley coming back from injury. So you are going down a couple clicks on that depth chart to fill out your top offensive line. So are they going to get to the point where they get one of those guys who's typically a guard? Are they going to get him a little run at tackle? Or are they just going to kind of let them all battle it out on the interior to see what happens? So that's, again, a storyline outside of quarterback, the big marquee one everybody knows about. That's one that's on top of my mind as well.
Switching over to the defensive line, this is the first year with Coach Deron Reynolds, overseeing the group. And, I've spent some extra time just, during practices kind of watching him, his approach, his method. And seems to be really kind of a very attention to detail, a really good teacher. You'll hear from defensive end Elijah O'Neal a little bit later on, and he really kind of raved about what he's been able to learn, even just in a short time, from Coach Reynolds. So it'll be interesting to see if this defensive line group, obviously it's a very deep, a lot of bodies in that position group right now, how they respond to the tutelage of Coach Reynolds. Starting up at the end spots, the pass rush has really overall through the first 3 days been consistent. And mentioning the quarterbacks, no matter who, has had usually like one pass rusher kind of bothering them on most dropbacks. And Clayton Smith has really jumped out to me as a guy who took advantage of the offseason. He's up to 245 pounds, just looks noticeably bigger, thicker. He's a guy who was kind of battling some nagging injuries a season ago, but now perhaps, with this added heft, and he still looks very explosive off the edge, that maybe he can be able to be more of a consistent factor, along with Prince Dorba, who's been running with the first group at one of the defensive end spots. Anthony Cooper, the veteran, has, after kicking inside last year, now seeing a little bit more time outside. Justin Watley, the Cincinnati transfer, has really jumped out to me as a guy who has the versatility to play inside or out, but also I think has been making some of his bigger plays so far in camp from the outside.
Yeah, those last two that you mentioned are ones that I'm curious to see, what they can bring to the table. Obviously, Anthony Cooper is a very known commodity around here, but they bring that unique ability to play multiple line positions, both inside and out. And great to hear good things about Clayton Smith. The combination of he and Prince Dorba, to me, that can be a very, very good one. As qualified as ASU has had in quite a few years, as far as just consistent ability on both sides of the edges. They got to get it started here, obviously, in the spring as they are. But as we're seeing, some versatility among this defensive line, as we noted last time out here. It's a long list of scholarship players. So this thing is going to be a dog fight along the defensive line. And that dog fight is not just for, a starting position or a two-deep position, but you're going to have a lot of guys, maybe not necessarily the ones that we've mentioned, but you're going to have a lot of guys that are more or less fighting for a roster spot, because at the end of the day, they could be here in the spring and, not even in the 5 deep, and you see the writing on the wall. So thick competition.
Speaking of thick, moving to defensive tackle, CJ Fight looks primed and ready to go. He's been making some plays and frequent visits into the ASU backfield as well, with Coach Reynolds, who obviously has been working with Von Miller and Aaron Donald annually at the Pass Rush Summit. CJ Fight could be a guy that really, in particular, is able to kind of take advantage of that as well. A pair of new defensive tackles have really kind of caught my eye so far. Jeff Clark from Louisville. He's smaller in size, perhaps more, akin to a Deshaun Mallory. His athleticism has been really impressive so far. Whereas, Jacob Kongaika, the Arizona transfer, it's a big, strong dude, much like Fight. So that's a lot of beef right there. So I think that trio in particular has looked really good to me so far early in camp. I just want to know who's going to be the next guy to take advantage, because obviously, as Joe mentioned, you need some depth on that line, and you have guys like Blazin Lona Wong, who's received some praise from defensive coordinator Brian Ward, perhaps forgotten man there. Tristan Munday in his second year as a Sun Devil. JP Dieter is another guy that ASU brought in, this from Purdue. Interesting pieces there, in the interior of the defensive line that I think will going to be sorting himself out after those top 3 guys.
Yeah, it's kind of a common story among a few positions, especially in that front 6 for ASU, of players that saw the field a lot for this program last year, but they're in a position where they're kind of fighting for their lives. You talk about a Tristan Munday, a Sam Benjamin, those are guys that started and played a lot last year. But the competition is going to be very challenging for them to remain in that high level of a depth chart position. Obviously, commonly applicable also at the linebacker, as we'll break down here in a moment. So, again, I know it's just a simple thing to say, but there is a ton of competition going on, and that's simply going to cause players to play their best and to put it on the line every single day of practice, knowing that things could slide dramatically if they don't.
Yeah, speaking of that competition at linebacker, Joe, I know you've been very excited about some of the newcomers, and they've looked really good. Zyrus Fiaseu and especially Keyshawn Elliott have looked really every bit the part of the impact players that the Sun Devils really, the coaching staff really was hoping that they could be, both in the run and against the pass. Keyshawn Elliott had a nice pick of Trenton Bourget during this week. Caleb McCullough, the longtime Sun Devil, looks like he's also kind of taken a step forward using last year's extensive experiences and yet another springboard forward. But after that, Jordan Crook has had his moments as the Arkansas transfer. But then who's else going to sort themselves out? Kavion Thunderbird's back. Tate Romney is a returning starter. But right now, I think the two biggest impacts so far have been coming from the newcomers in Fiaseu and Elliott.
And that's no surprise. We've talked about their accomplishments several times. These are all conference team leader, defensive leader caliber players from some solid group of 5 programs. So you see a guy like McCullough, it becomes that iron sharpening iron situation of, hey, these players know what's coming in. I mean, they know the caliber of the players that are joining the program. So it's not like they're going to completely sleep on them and say, oh, I didn't know that guy was that good. Oh, crap, I got to step my game up. No, I'm sure that they're entering the spring knowing, all right, it's go time. So if it's going to rise the tides of all players, that's a good thing for the team.
All right, moving to the secondary, starting at corner. Keith Abney has really looked good so far, he of course got a lot of run as a true freshman, thrown into the Wolves a little bit. Seen some reps at nickel, but he's really been, I thought, dialed in at cornerback opposite Ed Woods, the returning starter for the Devils. Looked really good, but two of the newcomers, and LaTerrence Welch and Javon Robinson, have each had some pretty good and impressive moments in coverage. Robinson also in special teams. I believe he had at least one and maybe a second blocked field goal as well. Freshman Chris Johnson, the second, has also looked pretty good in some 7-on-7 and 1-on-1 drills. Had what would have been a pick 6, but he dropped it, unfortunately. But got making some plays on the ball. But I think ASU right there at the corner spot is looking pretty good.
Yeah, and again, a position group where you lose a key starter, Ro Torrance, D4, a guy who started and maybe not the entire season, but played a lot. You're losing a couple of your highest caliber players from last year. Those transfers, we'll see how these coming weeks treat them. I've voiced out, intrigued I am by LaTerrence Welch. But you've got, young guys like Abney. Rodney Bimaj has been getting some run as well. That's, again, similar to other positions. It is just a depth chart Royal Rumble free-for-all with, a multitude of scholarship players going 4 to 5 deep with some quality. Now they got to put it all together, and they got to structure it so that it's ready to go on game day. But we've seen positions in the past where you get to that third string and you're dealing with walk-ons and not your Jordan Simone walk-ons or things like that. That's a different deal here with this team. If nothing else, especially on defense, at virtually every position, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know how star-studded it's going to be. But what you can say without question is that this coaching staff has done an incredible job at least fortifying the positions with transfers that seem like they can go and incoming recruits that have a pretty high pedigree. And when at least that gives you the opportunity. We'll see how the rest unfolds, but at least they have the personnel there to potentially do something pretty good.
Yeah, even you look at one of those newcomers, and Cole Martin, the former 4-star prospect out of Basha who played at Oregon last year. He's battling Mason Williams at nickel, and that looks like ASU's got a pair of really good options. You throw Abney in there, for some reps there, and you're looking pretty deep there. And then safety, I don't know, maybe the deepest position of all, because you have Xavier Halford, who continues to just look really, really good. He's going to be a problem for some Big 12 OCs this season. Montana Warren has been seeing a lot of run and opportunities so far, making the most of it. He had a nice pick there, kind of picking up where he left off. Last year he was playing some free safety and some nickel. This year, he's just been focusing on free, and I think that has really kind of allowed him to just kind of up his game in year 2 as well. Miles Ghost Rouser, the New Mexico State transfers, had some moments as well. Kamari Wilson, the Florida transfer, has been maybe a little bit on the quiet side, except for probably the loudest hit of camp when he put a good hit on George Hart, the third on a catch over the middle, which Hart held on, to his credit. But you see that some physical traits there. But man, and then you had Shamari Simmons, who is expected back in camp. This is just a really, really deep position group.
Yeah, multiple players with Division I starting experience. I believe like 4 or 5 across the board. A few of them are new to the team this year. It's, my goodness, it is. It seems and feels like an embarrassment of riches. That safety position, those 2 spots. It feels like there's just no excuse for that not to be a very good group. We don't know if it's going to be elite or nationally prominent. I'm not going to go that far, but if you look at that, you just have a hard time thinking, okay, how can these guys not be at least solid and above? Something that's really standing out and getting the job done. Because they've just got too much there, not for that to be the case, and that can be said maybe for some other defensive positions. It's the last 2 years, obviously, for this football team as a whole have been tremendously difficult, and I get that there are things that are holding this football program back from being able to truly capitalize on player personnel acquisitions, but you have to be happy with what this coaching staff has done on defense. Like I said, at cornerback, and that is echoed, of course, at safety, probably more so than any position, maybe other than linebacker, where, my goodness, I mean, you've got multiple new additions that are high caliber players, and you return some guys that can definitely play, including a guy like Shamari Simmons, a team MVP on defense there. So, yeah, I mean, that's just, again, a position group where you're going to see a bunch of dogfights, and then the ability to rotate and interchange a few different guys and potentially make that a strength of the team.
And then rounding things out with special teams. And so while we haven't been able to see a ton in the battle for kicker with Ian Hershey and Karsten Kiefer, and of course, as you mentioned, Parker Lewis, the one-time USC starter, coming over from Ohio State. He's expected over the summer. Somewhat uneven. Karsten Kiefer has been a little bit more consistent so far. They haven't been testing them too far in terms of the range, at least in the sessions, again, visible to us. But Kiefer overall on Thursday and Saturdays was like 3 for 4. And there's been some bad misses, maybe some, but also some nice kicks. Good drive there. So we'll see. They haven't been able to. They've not been outside. A lot of the special teams work does go on in the Dickey Dome during the course of a typical practice. So we'll continue to see exactly how the special teams shakes out. Some guys that are getting some in line to get some return work. Jake Smith, Melquan Stovall, of course, Raleek Brown. But there has been a lot of focus early on in camp. A lot of the kind of the punt teams and coverage units. So we'll see how special teams progresses over the course of spring.
Yeah, and those are spots that, again, they're not going to get a bunch of publication during the spring. And as we've noted multiple times, that what's there right now may very well just be holdovers until the additions come in the fall. But it's still an opportunity, for the kickers and punters. And yes, they'll have to do some damn near incredible things in all likelihood to hold off the arrivals that are making their way here in the fall in Lewis and Floyd. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. The best man's going to play at every single position. So that might demand near perfection from those athletes. I'm not saying that Lewis and Floyd are, automatic all-world Zane Gonzalez award winners or things like that. But it just seems like a high likelihood that those are going to be pegged as your starting place kicker and punter next year, so that the ones that are on campus right now have to put together a pretty stellar showing to hold them off. But that's at least an opportunity they have.
All right, so that's week 1 of Sun Devil spring football practice in the books. But now with, of course, the pads on at a more consistent basis, we should be getting a better feel in the weeks ahead. And, of course, we'll be breaking everything down. But now let's hear from a few of the Sun Devils that have been out there and vying to make their mark, win their jobs, starting with defensive end Elijah O'Neal. So second year as a Sun Devil, now that you got the kind of year of experience under your belt at this level, how does that kind of inform and change your approach to this year?
It changed my approach a lot, but being a guy that they're able to count on, you know what I'm saying? I've already spent a whole year learning this defensive scheme, and I feel like I got it down for the most part. There's always learning aspects along the way, but, I feel like I'm definitely going to be a guy that they can count on this year, as well as working with a good D-line group, a good unit. You know what I'm saying? I'm always getting better every day. So just day by day, learning and just getting better.
What was the kind of the value and the big lessons you took away from last year? You know, your first year in the Pac-12 at this level and as a Sun Devil.
Yeah, so my first year, like I said, it was just really learning everything, especially coming from a junior college. You know, learning the little techniques and the little things that I need to do to be successful as a DN. I just feel like the whole last year, I didn't get as many reps as I wish, so that definitely lit a fire under me this year, coming back and working as hard as I can to be that guy this year.
What's it like having, you know, maybe perhaps a clean slate with a new D-line coach and Coach Reynolds, and it's obviously still early, but some of the impressions you have of your new position coach?
Coach Reynolds, man, he's a great coach, man. He just brings so much insight and so much knowledge to me and the rest of the group that I feel like I didn't receive as much before, like ever. I've never had a D-line coach teaching me everything and breaking down pass rush step by step. So I feel like he's definitely gonna level up my game a lot and make me the best player I can be for this year.
Yeah, what's it like, that dynamic now? Obviously, you have yourself, you know, guys like Prince and Clayton in that room. It seems like you have a lot of like potent pass rush talent in that room.
Yes, we have a lot of talent. That's what I'm saying. Clayton Smith and Prince Dorba, really good guys that I've been able to be in the same group with. You know, they came from other big schools, so me coming into the group, just that first year, really learning from what they were doing and, you know, adding stuff to my own game, and you know, it all worked together for me.
Yeah, going that junior college route, how did that you know, that pathway to this level kind of, you know, inform your approach, your mentality, and just kind of the lesson you took away from going to, you know, through the JUCOs? Yeah,
well, junior college definitely made me hungry, man. You know, we did so much stuff that you know, allowed me to light that fire under me and get it going. You know, junior college, you don't have that many. You don't have the stuff that you have at Arizona State or any Power 5 school. So I'm just so thankful, you know, being able to treatment, you know, bags, practice, a lot of different things I can utilize to step my game up.
Now, you mentioned that, you know, having that experience and kind of, you know, a year under your belt. Now that, you know, in the second year, what are kind of the finer details and things that you know, in particular, you're seeing yourself make those strides and work on it and see those tangible gains now that you have that experience and that comfort in this defensive scheme?
You know, I just feel like I'm playing a lot more relaxed and just with everything, techniques, just because I got that 1 year under my belt with the defensive scheme. I just feel like I'm able to think smoother, you know what I'm saying, on the field. I'm able to, my speed has gotten, and my explosiveness, it's just all across the board, you know what I'm saying. I feel like I've seen a lot of gains in myself. So,
what are some of the things that you really want to show this coaching staff in spring, like your spring goals that you want to make sure you check off by the 26th?
I mean, I want to show them I'm a dog and then that they can count on me. You know what I'm saying? And I'm the guy for them this year. And I've stepped my game up a lot from last year, and I just want to, you know, have that trust from them in me, so they know that I can go out there and get the job done.
First week as a Sun Devil, how do you think it's gone so far?
Oh, it's pretty good, you know, having to learn from different programs, you know, it's pretty fun, like, it's mentally challenging, but, like, I feel like I got the hang of it already. I feel like I'm confident in the playbook.
What are the biggest differences between going to a program like Florida State out here to the desert?
It just melts to me, really, like, just learning different things. Like, I've been in college for a minute, so I know, like, what to expect and what to do. Like, I just got to make sure I'm on track with it.
Appreciating the no humidity out here?
Yeah, it's still hot, though. But I know Florida is a little hotter right now.
So why was Arizona State the right place for you to move on to?
I feel like they use their tight ends well. You know, I have my connection with Coach Dilly, you know, Coach Aurora. Like, I feel like I had a good connection with him on my visit, and I really liked them. So I feel like this was home for me.
What jumps out to you about the way that Dilly and Arroyo like to use their tight ends?
They stretch the field with them, backfield, slots, outside receiver. I just like that. I feel like it's a good fit for me. Like I can expand my game other than just blocking.
When you are looking at that tight end room, obviously you have another transfer in Cam, returning guy in Bryce. What's that dynamic like for you guys so far early on?
It's versatile. We like to challenge each other. Like every day, like I challenge Bryce to be faster than me. Even though I'm way heavier, I try to be faster than him. Cam, like I just feel like we challenge each other every day. Like and we also learn together. Like we really had that good family vibe in there.
You've been at a program that has gotten to the playoff and achieved some pretty significant goals. When you look at the culture there set by Coach Norvell, how do you kind of compare that to what Dilly's trying to build here in Tempe?
I feel like it's the same. He was Coach Dilly was actually at Florida State, so he know what it takes. He was building it with us, and he went off. So I feel like he's building that. He's bringing that over here to the West Coast. Like it's gonna take some time, but we're gonna get there.
How did it feel today? Get the pads on, ramp up the physicality.
Pretty good. We actually get to hit a little bit more. I feel like we can really fit up and get the runs going, moving space.
Early on, but impressions of your position coach, Coach Mons, and how he's going to be able to help elevate your game.
He's all around. He can teach me block and routes. Second level, first level. I feel like he got a real knowledge of the game. He feel like he can bring a lot to my game.
And then the rest of spring, what are some of the things that you want to show this coaching staff and how you want to position yourself heading into summer?
I can do whatever they need me to do. If they want me to scratch out, they want me to block, they want me to scratch the field, I can do it.
All right, so week one in the books as a Sun Devil. How do you think things gone so far?
I think things have gone really good. Having a lot of fun, bringing a lot of energy to the team, but having fun with my new brothers.
Have you gotten a little grief from maybe some of the friends and family about switching sides in the rivalry?
A little bit, but not too much. It's always love with my friends and family.
Why was Arizona State the right place for you?
I think it was the right place just because the coaches are great people. I think I can learn so much more from Coach Reynolds. Coach Dilly is a great person, and the teammates is even better people, as you can hear from the back. But great people.
I mean, granted, Tucson is very different than Tempe, but is it kind of like maybe the same environment? Sunshine, palm trees. Does it kind of help the transition?
A little bit. It's still the desert, so you're gonna get that heat here and there. So, but overall, it's a good transition.
And what about the scheme? What really stands out to you? Now that you got to practice 3 spring practices.
I think they preach more getting upfield this time, getting more knockback, and just like creating vertical pressure.
How do you feel your skill set kind of fits of what they ask for those interior linemen?
I just try to help as much as I can. Just keep going with my strong hands and getting as much knockback as I can, and just trying to help everybody else.
This is a defensive line. A lot of the linemen have said that you guys play freely. You guys have a lot of freedom to do that. So what kind of enables that, and how do you feel like are some of the benefits that kind of comes with that?
I think just being able to have our linebackers make us right is like what helps us play more freely. And then, what was the second question?
Yeah, just like what are some of the benefits of being able to play so free in the defense?
Being able to play so free, we'll be able to get in the backfield, make more plays, be able to give more plays to our other players, and just be able to be disruptive.
Who's the toughest offensive lineman to go against?
Toughest, Leaf for sure. Leaf.
So a lot of new faces in that D line room with you. You've seen you working a lot with like Jeff Clark, for example. What's that dynamic like? Which is kind of a lot of returners, but also some newcomers like yourself.
It's cool. It's actually really cool because I get to learn so much different things from a lot of different people. I mean, Jeff, just so quick off the ball and still so strong on the run and everything. And then like CJ, returner, strong on his get off and very good at like flipping his hip and everything in the pass game.
What stands out so far about what Coach Reynolds brings to you guys in that room?
I think he brings more the old school kind of vibe, but he's a great person, just great father, great coach, just great person overall.
I was thinking about today the St. John's Bosco kind of rivalry there. Were you part of that? Or you were a part of that, but like, did you know Sean Na'a when you guys were kind of going head to head against that?
He actually transferred to St. John Bosco the year after I graduated, but I had known him. We went against each other in like a camp here and there. So,
what are some things that kind of just stand out about the defense from like a culture standpoint that word is maybe kind of enable?
I think our culture is building it up a little by little every day, but we're getting there right now, and it's a lot of energy, a lot of fun, and we're just trying to be guys, just have fun.
What about the scheme kind of maybe drew you to this program rather than kind of staying at Arizona and doing doing what they were doing?
I like playing freely. When he said freely and just playing like to your best ability, I loved it. So
Why do you like it? Like, what are some things that make that?
I like to contribute, help other people make plays, but I do want to eat myself. You know, I'm a big boy, so I gotta eat here and there. You know what I mean?
What's kind of the approach the defense has kind of spring goes on? Like, what are some things you're learning about the approach?
I think they're teaching me more on my feet. I need to drive my feet a little bit more, and it's helping me like just get better with my hands and everything. But yeah, overall everything's the same.
As someone who's been in this rivalry between ASU and U of A, what's your just kind of your read on the vibe and what this rivalry means to the state?
There's two different stories, but overall it's a good competition and great people on both sides.
4 weeks left in spring ball. What are some of the things that you want to show over that span to your coaches and into your teammates?
I just want to show that I could be a leader, be able to help the D-line build and keep progressing, and just bring the energy to everybody, make everybody feel included.
Jacob, CJ said he's pound for pound the strongest. I guess you guys had a team competition. Who's strong?
You can ask CJ. If you want to bring him over here, he knows, but he's a strong guy, great person.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our guest Elijah O'Neill, Markeston Douglas, and Jacob Kongaika. Of course, with spring ball in full swing, and of course the Sun Devil spring sports as well, ramping up as their seasons are hitting the home stretch. A lot going on, so be sure to follow us on the social media side, on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, Instagram at Speak of the Devils, subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow me on social at BDenny29.
And you can follow me at Joe Healy 42. A huge thank you and shout out, as always, to our outstanding and loyal sponsors: Jones Auto Group, DevilsDigest.com, Cactus Sports, Burrito Express, Spaghetti Shack, and Sun Devil Family Charities.
And also be sure to support the good brand and the good folks at homefieldapparel.com and get 15% off your first order. They have a 26-piece Sun Devil apparel collection that is pretty amazing. You can get 15% off. Just use offer code SOTD23 at checkout at homefieldapparel.com. And also be sure to give us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice after you support our amazing sponsors. Joe and I will be back next week as we recap week 2 of Sun Devil spring football.